Okay. Hello and welcome to episode 136 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
I'm doing great. I am really excited to talk some Enterprise here and put our writing caps on again. This is probably one of our newer topics that we've done, but it's also kind of slowly becoming one of my favorites to talk about. So it's just an interesting way to look at Trek a little bit differently. So it should be fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a cool way to examine Star Trek as far as like the kind of Star Trek we would want to see. Get creative instead of just kind of reflecting on what happened or what exists. It's a different spin on the Star Trek conversation that I've definitely that I really enjoyed the first time we did it a couple weeks ago. I thought it was a lot of fun and enlightening, and it made me think about Star Trek in a way I don't usually think about it. So yeah, and as anybody who knows me knows, I love Enterprise. The early pulling of the plug on the show is one of the more bitter pills to swallow. One of the more painful things to sort of reckon with in the 50 some year history of the whole franchise. So getting to sort of imagine what we would do if we were hired and in the room developing a hypothetical fifth season of Enterprise and getting to have some creative control over the direction of the show and what we would like to see it do is a really exciting, interesting prospect, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you think, and to kind of meld our ideas together and see what works for us, and then hopefully if anybody out there is watching, get your opinions as well on where we're going with it. And we are eager to hear your comments. If you're in the room watching, I've seen a couple people pop in the live stream feed. If you're in the room and you have ideas about what we're talking about or different ideas, certainly throw them out there, and we'll take them into account, check them out on air, and rattle them around and see what we can do with them. So definitely eager to hear what everybody and anybody thinks about a potential Enterprise Season 5. So yeah, looking forward to this. Before we get started, we didn't do this last week. We had Jim on last week, Enterprise Extra Trek Ranks, for a fantasy draft. That was really, really cool. Good time. Everybody should check it out. But we skipped our rewatch recap. I don't know if we have anything to really update on, but I'm curious. Do you have any?
Yeah, I'll just update where I am. I think the last episode I watched was The Circle. It's
Okay.
the second episode in season 2 of Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
Going slow, not by choice, but just by
Necessity, life circumstances.
what's going on. But yeah, I'm really enjoying early season 2 of Deep Space Nine. I like that they just haven't really completely written off the whole premise of the show. They're kind of diving into the Bajoran backstory and the struggles of kind of rebuilding everything there. And Cisco's kind of caught in the middle between that. So yeah, it's a good time so far.
Yeah, I'm eager to hear what you think as season 2 kind of gets rolling and gets into the thick of it. They do a pretty interesting job of, I think, bridging the gap between kind of TNG style storytelling that's definitely still very much in the air and is more there than it maybe is noticeable later in the show. Like it still looks more like TNG than later Deep Space Nine does, but it definitely has in its DNA some of the more serialized, long-running character development,
for sure.
heavy elements that kind of define Deep Space Nine. It's a weird mix of the two. I don't know that the show has completely found its own voice yet, like many of the Star Trek shows. It maybe takes a couple of seasons to really get into that smooth groove, but the building blocks are definitely there, and you can definitely see signs of the direction they're going to head into.
Yep.
So yeah, hopefully some of your circumstances settle down a little bit, and you get to relax and enjoy some of that in the next few weeks. For me, I'm in between seasons 3 and 4 of TNG. I did a sort of rewatch recap, solo little supplemental show a couple weeks ago, preparing for the fantasy draft with Jim. I did the draft order on that, and then I talked about having finished season 3 of The Next Generation. So you can find that on the Periscope feed if you are watching this here on Periscope or Twitter. You can get into the history of our live streams. It's not on YouTube, but it's there. I showed my episode rankings. Talked about the episodes I love the most. Some of the ones that I think are not as much for me. But it's definitely one of my favorite seasons in Star Trek. We've talked a little bit. We've talked extensively about TNG Season 3 in the last few weeks. Our first fantasy draft was TNG Season 3. And that was just a few weeks ago, a couple months ago. So I'm certainly on the record in recent weeks talking about how much I love the season as a whole. But I'm looking forward to getting into season 4. I would think maybe today I might watch Best of Both Worlds Part 2 and maybe Family later today and get off and running with that.
Good run.
Yeah, it is. The end of season 3. That 3 Best of Both Worlds Part 1, 2, and then Family is a pretty good trio. They're kind of a 3-parter. They're not formally linked by part 1, part 2, part 3, but they definitely go well together, and are good to watch kind of in a run like that. So hopefully I'll do that today. All right, so I guess we should jump into the fray of this. We've had this running for a few minutes, and giving people a chance to pop in before we get into the thick of what we're going to talk about this week, which we've gotten a good bit of cool responses on Twitter about. We've gotten a good number of pieces of input, different ideas that people kind of have in mind with things they'd like to see developed over the course of a 5th season. Here today, we're going to focus pretty intently on kicking off the season. Like, what would we do? Like, we're not looking to get too broad here and big picture. Like, where does the season go as a whole? We'd like to talk about, where do we start this thing? How would we get the ball rolling on a theoretical 5th season of Enterprise? And my first question and my first kind of thing I would want to like lay down there and deal with is obviously these are the voyages. It throws a wrench.
We did not lay any ground rules. Can we bring back a character?
Well, we can. I think we easily can, because the big thing to remember with These Are the Voyages is it obviously it takes place in a holodeck and it's a TNG kind of story, but it takes place, even like Enterprise stuff that we see in These Are the Voyages, takes place like 10 years or 7 years or whatever after the Demons Terra Prime 2-parter that precedes it, the John Paxton xenophobia story. Like, there's a big time jump. So I think the first thing, These Are the Voyages, they've kind of gotten through, theoretically, they don't talk about it, but presumably through the Romulan War, the Federation's being founded. There are things that have happened between Terra Prime and These Are the Voyages. And my instinct would be the best way to sort of ignore These Are the Voyages and to play with the most interesting stuff to play with in the Enterprise continuity. And I think the most interesting point in that timeline to jump into would probably be after Terra Prime, and we'll deal with These Are the Voyages down the road. Would you agree with that? Like, basically allow us to ignore These Are the Voyages? I would.
Yeah, let's ignore that. Yes,
let's do it. So These Are the Voyages does not factor into our conversation. It hasn't happened yet. Even if you are of the opinion that it's completely legit, it's canon, which I would agree with. It's on screen, so it's legit, and whatever, however you want to feel about the episode as a whole. In my mind, it's something we have to deal with eventually, but we don't have to deal with it right now because it hasn't happened yet. We're going to jump right into many years pre These Are the Voyages. So, the last thing we've seen at the end of season 4 in that through that lens would be Trip and T'Pol having lost that baby, the clone baby, and dealing with the repercussions of that emotionally and how it affects their relationship. Archer's given that speech, the coalition of planets. It's not the Federation yet, but a smaller, more early baby steps version of it is chartered. We have an alliance between the humans, the Vulcans, the Andorians, the Tellarites. We have the Romulans lurking out there and seemingly very unhappy with us, not wanting a coalition of species in the Alpha Quadrant working together. They're going to see that as a threat. That's pretty well established. Reed's got some Section 31 dealings that are kind of left hanging. That's kind of where we are. So I guess my first.
So we got the lay of the land.
We got the lay of the land. This is what we're operating with directly in our rearview mirror with starting a theoretical season 5. So what kinds of things interest you the most, Dan? Like what would you, just base level instincts for how to kick this off? What would you want to explore?
Base level, just not like overarching themes, but just things that we can start off with these first 2 episodes. Because I think we kind of talked about it. We're going to do this season opener is going to be a 2-parter, maybe a 3-parter, whatever. But the things that I want to explore are the founding of the Federation, obviously, and then the Romulan War, or something like that. The only issue I have in my mind, the episode that I'm trying to formulate here is, I have trouble diving into another war, especially with kind of coming off the heels of the Xindi stuff. Which, I don't know if he would call it a war in the sense that we've seen in Star Trek before, but
it's definitely going to present, and I think it's probably fair to assume that maybe that weighed into the creative decision not to do the Romulan War, like to kind of drag their feet on that with Enterprise as it actually happened. Not only did they do something similar with the Xindi in season 3, I think the pressure of just a few years before that in production time, they did the Dominion War on Deep Space Nine, and I think there was probably a fear of going back to that well too often and putting these characters in wartime situations too often. So that's definitely something that we would have to contend with. I think it's a big benchmark in sort of pre-established Star Trek history that we would have to deal with. I think there are some creative challenges to making sure that executing that would be, that it would be executed in a fresh way and not derivative of the stuff that we saw in Deep Space Nine and in Enterprise season 3. We would have to find a fresh lens to show that. But I think it's possible. I think especially with season 3 of Enterprise, I think that you can look at it as putting these characters into that kind of a situation as a burden. We've already done that. Or you can look at it as an opportunity. These characters have been through this before, while the rest of Earth and the rest of Starfleet, the Enterprise was kind of off on its own, doing this by itself, very much on an island, dealing with the Xindi thing. And Archer and crew, in comparison to the rest of the fleet, and maybe even many of the higher ups in the New Vulcan High Command, or the New Vulcan government, not the High Command anymore after season 4, haven't been in these kinds of situations before. So that kind of puts Archer into a very much a leader position, and somebody who can speak from experience and lead by example from the fact that he's done this before. He's been in these kinds of difficult, challenging situations. So I think there are opportunities there. I think that's something that I would probably my instinct would be to kind of build to that in season 5, build up Romulan aggression and Romulan interference over the course of the 5th season. There were definitely bits of that in season 4. There's that 3-parter with the Romulans, sticking their nose in with the drone ship and causing dissent between these species. I think, that's it's been established that the Romulans are going to do that and are concerned with this coalition building that's going on, and they're going to try to disrupt it. And now that the coalition has been formalized, that there is a treaty, there's an alliance between these species, I think that would you could certainly build up some increased Romulan aggression. Like, they're going to up their game now because they're not trying to stop it from happening. They're trying to throw a wrench in the tires, so to speak, with it running at this point.
Yeah.
So that's something we'd have to deal with for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that
do you want to dive into specifics? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'm curious. We didn't talk about this beforehand, so there are not like jointly formed ideas about these specifics. I have a couple of things in mind, but I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you have. If you have specific things that you would have that you'd be interested in exploring in a potential like Enterprise season 5 episode 1. So do you have any?
I do have some.
What do you got?
Yeah, I'll go into it. And this is just to preface this. This is a workshop. This is not set in stone, but this is just
sure. Yeah, this is us throwing out there. We're bearing our soul, so creative soul.
In my mind, there would be a time jump. I would say a year to maybe 18 months.
Okay.
We come to this coalition trying to work. There's a falling out. The Romulans, Klingons, whatever, they pull out. They were involved in the early stages, but they pull out, which kind of shocks the group, and all the rest of the species, they want to pull out as well, but they gotta find some way to to kind of to keep this
from falling apart,
coalition together. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, the crew, the Enterprise has come back for a refit. So that just scatters the crew. Some people aren't sure if they want to come back. Archer is MIA. He's just out. He's we can't find him. I think it's just T'Pol in working with the coalition to keep it together. And kind of the rest of the crew is more or less scrambled. Mm-hmm. And I think, in my mind, this would probably be the last season. So I would try to echo a little bit Broken Bow here, where I would let's say, to keep this coalition together, we got to put together a ship to accomplish something. Mm-hmm. That's I haven't really thought about that, but so again, like in Broken Bow, Archer goes to different places, gets the crew. I think T'Pol does the same thing. Like, let's say go to Hoshi. There's some communications between the Romulans and someone else, something that we could get into that needs translating, that needs broken, that needs her expertise. So you got to bring her back, and you kind of got to bring the rest of the crew and then I could dive into really specific details, but that's kind of the gist of it. And I think it would be fun to put members of this coalition on the Enterprise. Mm-hmm. Well,
that definitely lends itself to at least one big thing that's definitely been floated. In the Enterprise season 4 Blu-ray, there's a cast reunion, and in that cast reunion, Brandon Braga talks about one of the ideas that they had for a potential season 5 was to put Jeffrey Combs on the ship as Shran and have him be a regular. Like, they were going to add him to the more permanent ensemble. And I had that written down as well. I think there are a couple things that happened even in season 4. Shran lost his ship in that trilogy of episodes, and he mentions as he's getting beaming off the Enterprise that the Andorian High Command does not look fondly on captains who lose their ship, and he's kind of concerned about what his next assignment's going to be, what he's going to have to do, and you could certainly, I could certainly see the breadcrumbs leading to Shran, almost as a punishment, and like the Andorians kind of half-assing this, you know, this coalition of planets idea, saying, okay, you've done all this stuff with the humans and Archer, and you've been doing all this stuff. So we're gonna give you the assignment to go deal with it, and sit on the bridge of that ship and make the best of it, and leave us alone, and do your thing. So I can definitely, I agree with the idea of having to have these coalition species that are trying to hold this thing together work together, and put them in a position where they have to be together. And my idea for the Andorian element of that would certainly be to have Shran be a more permanent fixture on the show, and have him be injected into the dynamic of the crew. And it seems like we have a way to do that.
Yeah, so definitely, like, that's been maybe the first hour, just get the crew together, figuring out what's going on with the Enterprise and stuff. I think it would be fun to have the last person that they go to, or they have to find, is Archer. And they find him, and he doesn't want to come back. It takes some convincing, right? It takes, it's T'Pol kind of like saying, "Hey, this is, I don't know."
Yeah, no, I think that's always that's a an interesting place to put Archer. Archer definitely has had moments like that in the course of the show. He has, after the Cindy,
got burnt out.
He gets burned out, and he's not sure of himself all the time. You don't get the sense that he is always eager to be like this monumental figure that is kind of perched at the top of the pyramid, holding this thing together. He has some discomfort with that, indicated over the course of the show. So you can certainly, with everything that you've kind of laid out, as far as we have a little bit of a time jump. It's not going completely smoothly. There are some challenges. They tried to involve the Klingons, and maybe even sent overtures over to the Romulans to try to bring these species together and to build peace and make it all stable. And it's not going entirely smoothly. There's shockwaves of discontent making their way through, and potentially disrupting the health of the coalition. And you can certainly, I can see in what I know of Jonathan Archer, what we've seen of him on screen for 4 seasons, that he would take that personally, that he would take that on, and not, and maybe feel like he's failed and doesn't want to, keep involving himself if he doesn't feel like he's succeeding. I think that's a reasonable place if that's the direction we're going to go with the time jump and exploring this from a place of it's not working yet and it's a process. That's a place that he would be in and would need to get pulled back in, and that's a cool place to, I think, start to see. I think it reestablishes the connection of the crew to have to Paul and whoever else have to pull Archer back in to the dynamic that strengthens the bonds of the crew and makes it, I think that pulls on the heartstrings of the Star Trek family idea that kind of is consistent through these shows, and feels right to me. So I think that's a good idea. What do you see him doing? Like, do you see him kind of just hiding out and being on Earth and kind of isolating himself, figuring out what he wants to do? What do you?
I just see him like out in a remote area where it's really thick wilderness, maybe a log cabin, or something, where he can do some like rock climbing and just be like alone and not in the spotlight at all. Just find a little corner somewhere, because I feel like he would be a little bit tired of really being in the spotlight. His family history and then what's getting going on because uh, he's just burnt out and he wants to be alone and stuff. So
Okay.
I would that's where I would see him, maybe rock climbing or something to kind of throw back to um, Star Trek 5 or something like that.
Sure.
But
Even in home, like in Home, and in the beginning of season 4, that's kind of what he does. He having been burned out by this indie thing, he kind of gets upset and goes off, and that's exactly what he does. He goes to I don't know where exactly he is, but he rock climbs and he ends up with Captain Hernandez of the Columbia, the NX-02, which is another thread that I think is kind of juicy and something that we could play with in a potential season 5. The dynamics between the NX-01 and the NX-02, the two captains kind of having a history and a unique dynamic. Like where does that go? How connected are these two ships? How often are they together and kind of on joint ventures? Are they completely separate in different parts of the spectrum, or are they kind of working together in some ways? I think there are some cool things to explore potentially down the road. But I think what you've kind of laid out gives us quite a bit to play with for just one episode. I mean, if we're dealing with 42 minutes, I can kind of see these scenes in my head with T'Pol dealing with, being on the ship and in command and dealing with the fallout of everything and trying to piece it together, dealing with the heads of the coalition. Maybe it's T'Pol, the head of the Vulcan government at the end of that arc. Figurehead Andorian general or whoever that's at the top of the chain.
yeah,
We get a scene of him assigning Shran to the Enterprise. We're going to try one last thing to keep this thing together. There's going to be a Tellarite Tellarite liaison going to the ship. We need to send an Andorian. It's going to be you. You're the one who has experience with these people. You're the one who's responsible for this mess. You're going. I can see that scene playing out. I can see T'Pol and that Andorian, going toe to toe and talking about this. And then of course we have Archer, missing from the picture, and the Enterprise crew trying to figure out like what's he doing and where is he? Do we even want to stay? Like, it's a cool way to like check in with each character. Like, what do they want to do? Even Travis Mayweather at the end of Demons and Terra Prime, he's talking about with his girlfriend, his old girlfriend, who's the reporter. For the first time, he's kind of wondering, does he want to live in space for the rest of his life? Does he want to settle down? That there's even like a character thread there. He's a very unexplored character and kind of a.
My idea,
But
my idea for Travis is he has settled. He's teaching at Starfleet Academy, doing something with something like that, and he's got to get pulled too. So.
Okay.
My idea too is like there. I want to work in the 602 Club as well. So my idea is that Archer officially says no, not doing it. So they all go back. They're all at the 602 Club. They got to report like stupid early tomorrow morning. Like the place is packed, and then Archer walks in, place dead silent, and they all turn and look, and then it just cuts to next week.
Nice.
So,
yeah, I think
to get into specifics, but
the fact that I can see it in my head tells me that I think it's a good running off point, and a good way to potentially kick something like this off. I think it's certainly tempting to want to keep going with it and to like develop it further and keep going with episodes, but I kind of want to keep it contained to one episode for now, and maybe return to this over time and keep building. There are some bigger picture things that I'm curious about, just as like a like how would this season work? Like, do you see this season kind of looking more like Enterprise season 4 did, with the little mini arcs, like 3 parters, like kind of connecting it together? Do you see it more like season 3, where it's like a single arc, single running, like more traditionally serialized format? Like, how would you, in your perfect world, if you're show running this, how would you want to approach the structure of the season with this in mind? Like, this is how we're off and running. Do we see this kind of building to is this a 2-parter? Is this or is this starting a big long arc that is I mean, it's tough. Season 4 has these mini arcs, but there's like an overarching arc that kind of links them all together too, with the running toward the founding of that coalition at the end of the season. So,
Which I would probably stay with that kind of theme. I probably wouldn't go season 3 style
mhm,
of the season structure. I kind of want to keep that contained to that season.
mhm.
My gut tells me to go with 2 or 3 like season arc or episode arcs, but there is that overarching theme. So there's
That
a
keeps
bunch
it
of
running.
like mini arcs that keeps it running, but there's this common thread that kind
Mhm.
of you work through uh, because and just to kind of go back to the Romulan War stuff, it's funny. I picture this long drawn out war, but I think it. I looked it up. I think it's only like 4 years.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. I
Yeah,
could
I
be wrong.
think
I could be way wrong.
I don't
Yeah,
think there's a ton formally established on screen, so I think they would have had some leeway to make it work the
that's
way
true.
they
I
needed it
think a
to
lot of
work.
it comes from literary
Yeah,
literary stuff. So,
exactly. There's very little. I think the
yeah.
only real reference to a Romulan war comes in TOS. Like there's in Balance of Terror. There's talk that these species have had a real conflict in the past. They haven't seen each other. I mean, humans haven't seen Romulan faces, so that kind of limits what you can do. There's no that kind of ties your hands a little bit with, and I think that was another thing that probably made them hesitate with going there. And it's not. You have to find ways to not see the Romulans. Like in Balance of Terror, it's pretty clearly laid out that humans didn't know that
Hmm.
Romulans were offshoots of the Vulcans.
Yeah.
That was not a well known um, piece of information. So that's something that has to be contended with. Uh, but as far as like the timeline goes, how long does the war last? You know, that I think would be because it mostly comes from literary sources that on screen stuff. If we were doing this for real on screen, could override anything that
Hmm.
was in the novel.
Yeah.
Real
Yeah.
quick,
So I mean, I guess. Sorry. Go ahead.
where would you see in your mind because you kind of developed a lot of this? Where do you see T'Pol and Trip in the fallout of their
Uh,
are they?
uh,
I mean, that's the
as
one.
pains to me.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, the one thing that would pain me a little bit with jumping in time, and I'm would be that I think some of the stuff that I'd be the most interested in exploring would be the fallout of that. Um, but I mean, there's an opportunity there to even with the time jump, illustrate, and maybe the time jump is even better as I'm thinking it out loud. To instead of dealing with these two people just grieving over the loss of a child and picking up the pieces from that instead of having to watch that play out on screen, jumping through that and getting to see them on the other side of that with whatever direction they kind of choose to go in, or are they in limbo still, kind of in no man's land with um, their dynamic? I think there's an opportunity there to take it in any direction really. Um, but where do you see it? Where would you want to go with that?
As pains me is that just talking about overall seasons. I mean, we could explore it
Mm-hmm.
during the season, but I don't think it ends. It ends with them not together, which pains me.
Well,
I'd love to see them together, but
if we have to live by
yeah,
what These Are the Voyages does, I'm
yeah,
sorry, if we have to live by what These Are
yeah,
the Voyages does, These Are the Voyages pretty well establishes that they don't end up together, that it's not a happy ending.
yeah, yeah.
And as much as I don't really like that, I don't like. But what I don't like about it is that there's no. I don't feel like that's earned at all. I feel like jumping directly from what we saw at the end of Terra Prime to 10 years later, however many years that was, 7, 8 years later, they're kind of just done and they don't really talk much, and it's this thing
Yeah.
that it's undiscussed. Like, to me, that's dramatically unsatisfying. But what we would have here is an opportunity to explore that in more detail and earn that it doesn't end well. So I'm not inherently opposed to not having them live happily ever after and be the first human Vulcan couple. Like, I don't know that that's the right decision either to do that, to make it this happy marriage kind of situation. But I would be eager to go somewhere with that and explore it and have that be a a story point for a longer running element of this kind of situation.
Yeah, specifically, I think if we're reeling it back to just these first two episodes that we're talking about here, trying to write, I think we should explore a dinner with the captain type of interaction, because I think there's some potential we could do, because I think just Trip and Paul having dinner with Archer,
Mm-hmm.
or breakfast or whatever
Mm-hmm.
we want to do, but I think it would be fun to kind of do that, because I feel like there's always been like a Carbon Creek type of
Mm-hmm.
storytelling element that's always been fun.
Enterprise
Now it's
is
kind of harking back
yeah
to previous seasons.
yeah one of my favorite things in season 3 is that little scene at the end. I think it's in Countdown, like one of the second to last episode. Season 1 and 2, the one of the recurring things is them sitting at that dining room table, like Archer and Trip and T'Pol, or Archer and whoever, and having a meal, having dinner, lunch, whatever, breakfast. And then obviously with season 3 being what it is, that doesn't happen very often. But right at the end of season 3, like as they're getting ready to go off and have this last hurrah with the Zindi, the three of them are sitting around, and Archer and Trip are having like a steak dinner. And it's very much like this comforting throwback to like, this is where we came from. Like, this is the roots. This is how these people bond. This is the thing that holds this trio together. And I think anytime they go back to that, they didn't really do it much in the 4th season either. But it's such a rooted thing at the beginning of the show. I would definitely be eager to kind of bring that back as like a recurring motif, or at least bring it back as like maybe use it as a big moment to have that, like if Archer ends up back on the ship in episode 2 or 3, that's a scene that has to happen with the three of them, or maybe the three of them plus Shran if he's kind of injected into this dynamic.
He's down at the other end of the table with his feet up, drinking,
the rain ale, and having his own perspective on things. But I would definitely be eager to have a dining room table scene, sort of illustrating. I think that's the tool to like illustrate that we're kind of back to some version of normal. Like that's the earned, like we got through this, piecing the crew back together. This is like we're off and running here. Season 5, crew's together, dynamics shaped. But that would come later.
Yeah,
not episode 1.
In my head, I'm seeing like just it's silent. They're all just eating. And then the silence is broken with Shran saying like some witty thing.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's great, because each of the characters, especially if we're coming into it with this time jump, each of these characters has kind of lived with things. They all have baggage. Archer's got the baggage of, the struggles with Coalition, and the pressure of that kind of driving him to a dark place, and maybe wanting to call it quits and let somebody else take the reins. Trip and T'Pol have their relationship struggles and coming to terms with where they stand. Shran lost his ship. He's in career no man's land. He's been offshoot to this, nobody wants assignment. There's that. So having them all sitting around after having, been eventually put back together again, kind of silently eating and slowly kind of opening up and talking about where they are in life, and where they see themselves going with this new mission, is I think a cool way to go.
Anything else? One thing I'll mention that I noticed on Twitter, at least, there was a lot of mirror universe love, which really surprised me, because
people love it. People especially love the Enterprise.
I know. Sorry. Because I think there's other things that we could explore, definitely in the Enterprise, what's been going on. But I think it's just really curious to me that one of the most
common threads,
requested things, at least on Twitter, at least, was what's going on Emperor Hoshi and then the Mirror Universe side. So
people love it, but I think even when I watch season 4 of Enterprise now, like I like those episodes a lot. I think they're witty and fun and there's a lot of nostalgia porn stuff that's satisfying with bringing back those old sets and the old production stuff. There's cool things in that episode, and I think it does some neat things with the mirror universe, and I love the way it now ties into Discovery, and it's like an essential part of the story now. But you know, it never they're bittersweet to me because they're right at the end of that fourth season. There's so much potential there with our main story, with the building toward the Federation and the character dynamics of our main folks on the NX-01, that even as much as I like those episodes, I always feel like, do I really want to spend this time away from them? Like, these are episodes. This is like precious time with our crew. So that to me would be like the big give and take with going back to that. I like what they did, and I think there are some interesting, cool things to explore with the Enterprise version of the Mirror Universe story. But the struggle would inherently be like, is this time better spent with our crew? Especially if our time is limited. If we're looking at one season or a shorter season, if this is a more new school Star Trek 13, 14 episode season, do we want to use 2 of those for Mirror Universe stuff? 2 episodes, 3 episodes in the course of seasons 5, 6, and 7, 22 episodes, 24 episodes each. Sure, I'd be inclined to want to do that, but if time is limited, I would have a hard time pulling away from the stuff that I love so much about our established crew and that story. But I noticed that too. I'm not maybe not as surprised as you are, because those 2 In a Mirror Darkly episodes are seen as such classics that they kind of lend themselves. They end on kind of a to be continued note, with Empress Hoshi Sato and on the Defiant going back to Earth. It ends at a point where there's a natural pickup from there that people want to see. But I'm kind of in the middle. I mean, we talked about that many times. The Mirror Universe is something I enjoy when it's done well, but I also kind of inherently tend to resist the urge to double back to things too often. So I might I might end up on the side of let's just leave it sitting as is. But I don't know. One of the things I'd love to do with this idea is keep going back to Enterprise Season 5, and keep developing from this point on. Although it's
2-3 episodes.
It's painful because it makes me want Enterprise Season 5.
These are things, order, right?
Yeah. It's a tough pill to swallow that these kinds of things probably can't happen, but it's fun to think about, and it's interesting to explore, the different directions we could take it, and I love what you did. I didn't. That's probably different than where I would have gone, but I think it's right. I think it's a cool way to jump in and to put the characters, especially knowing what we know, approaching it from where we actually sit, where years have passed, and this is like this thing that a lot of people really want. I like the way you've kind of subverted expectations by jumping forward. The crew's kind of broken up and has to be repieced together. The coalition's not going incredibly well. Like, I think with the context of where we actually sit, that would be probably the right way to pick this back up and not have it be natural season 5, no time has passed, we're jumping right back in and everything's smooth sailing and we're just forward motion. Like, this is probably the way to toy with people dramatically and make it satisfying. So
one more thing I'll mention that I kind of mentioned at the top of the show is the refit of the Enterprise. I know there's been some things been floating around about. You can look up. I think there's a rendering done.
Oh, yeah.
I know there is.
There's an Eagle Moss model that I don't have, which I do.
Yeah, with the secondary hull, the engineering section, which I think is really cool. I like the design. The issue I have is we don't see it in These Are the Voyages. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's just so the timeline would be a little bit messed up, or they take it back off. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, These Are the Voyages is such an annoyance. The fact that it exists really does,
in many ways.
It hamstrings a lot of things. But I mean, I kind of when you said the ship's being back at Earth being refit, my natural assumption was that that's the opportunity to that's when this happens. The ship gets refit and gets kind of bulked up. Um, advancements have been made. The ship has a taller order now. It's bigger. Bigger mission.
Crew complement.
It needs bigger crew complement.
Yeah.
It's just everything's bigger. So they kind of refit the ship a little bit and add the secondary hull, and I think that makes sense in the timeline of where we are and how we're doing this. So, but you're right. I mean, that the big hurdle there is, do you just ignore these are the voyages? And but my instinct would be to
we could fix it.
We can fix it. We'll deal with it later.
In my mind, it does get refit, so then it gets damaged later on, and they have to do something. I don't know. We could fix it easily.
Let's say it gets refit,
or it doesn't get refit, but they give the illusion that it's being refit. So they're like they mess with hollow technology to be able to display this fake Enterprise still getting worked on, and there's always the rumor mill is churning like, oh, there's a ship that's got all these this group that's a bunch of different roaming the galaxy, fighting crime or whatever, something like that. But no, it's we're not. It's still in dry dock. Look, it's I don't know.
I'm down for anything. I think it's Star Trek, so there is not really a limit on what you can do. You can twist and turn and come up with explanations for all kinds of things. It could be it's an issue with the holodeck program. on like the stuff we're seeing in These Are the Voyages is through the lens of a holodeck program. And it's a 200-year-old holodeck program. Like we're going back in time 200 years, looking at a historical record.
It's not accurate.
It's not perfect. Yeah. Like there's a historical inaccuracy to it. Like happens today when you see movies made about 200 years ago. There's inevitable, people picking it apart, going, "Yeah, that's not the way that uniform looked," or "That's not the way that worked." That piece of technology wasn't there then.
The ship actually had a
secondary hull that was built by that time.
Hull. It wasn't the original. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So there's anything you can do all kinds of things. And I think the ship gets a refit. I think it's back on Earth. That's why we're there. That's the opportunity. The ship's been kind of out of commission for a little bit, having this work done, and that's been the opportunity that's kind of put the crew in this position where they kind of have to sit and think and decide if they want to go or stay. There's time where these guys get to kind of take inventory of where they stand, and like you said, you have Travis kind of teaching on Earth. We could you could certainly make that be that's what he's that's what he ended up going to do while the ship was being refit, and he wants to stay. Like it wasn't maybe a conscious decision, I'm leaving right out the gate, but he went to do that while the ship's being refit, and now he's kind of content, doesn't necessarily want to go back, and is enjoying living on a planet for once. Hoshi's
because I think
in Brazil doing her teaching and kind of done with the whole space thing. She didn't want to be out there for her whole life, her whole career. And these people have to get pulled back in after a rough few years of living through really really tough times and struggles. I think it lends itself to putting the characters in a position where they have to take inventory and end up in this limbo stage.
Yeah. Sorry, real quick to backtrack back to Travis, which the character that I really deeply love, and there's some missed potential there, but
very much so.
I think his early life being like pretty much on the road in space all the time, I think he kind of wants to flip flop and come back to something where it's the same. It's really their structure and stuff. So I think that really him settling down. I mean, we don't have to. I mean, we can't do Earth, but we could do anywhere. But settling down, I think, is probably.
I think that's
the best direction for his character. But him having to be pulled back would be fun as well.
So. Yeah, having to be convinced, having a purpose to go back. Like, there's a reason they need him back. Archer's got to, or T'Pol has to ask, whoever has to ask him to come back. But I think where he's left off at the end of Terra Prime, he's walking. I think her name is Gannett, off the ship and taking her to a shuttle, and he's saying, or it might have even been earlier on in Demons where he's with her and talking about, maybe I don't want to be on a ship for the rest of my life and have my entire existence be in space. Like, I kind of like the idea of putting down roots and having a home that's stable. I think that's a natural direction for his character to end up in, and I think there are breadcrumbs that naturally lead us there, and I think that would be a natural step to take. I think that's perfect, and I think Hoshi is also same kind of deal. There's a lot of meat there to draw her into a situation where she would need to be pulled back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I think that's good. I think the groundwork is there for a cool season opener that kind of isn't exactly what people would expect. Isn't just we're on the ship doing our thing. Next leg of the mission. No struggles. I like the fact that it flips those expectations and does something different. I think that's the right way to go. Any other thoughts on how you would start this, or early season 1 or season 5, like, or other things that you have in your mind that you'd want to play with, get to? Do you see us doing things with Reed's Section 31 ties? Like, do you see that kind of that comes back around?
I think he's still operating within those parameters. He seemed to me like he was a career kind of military, really service duty type of guy. So I don't see him getting out of Starfleet. I don't see him. I think he's still out there. I think we meet up with him. He's going to join the crew a little bit later on in the season, maybe 2 or 3 episodes in, because he's been deep in ties with what the overarching theme is in the in the season. So I think the first episode, I think we've kind of focused on we're getting the crew back together, but then I think the second episode, there's got to be, if we're doing a 2-parter, there's got to be something to do, like that kind of kicks this whole thing off.
Yeah, there's definitely more specifics that we would have to work out as far as like where, like, what's this, like, what are we doing, like, how is this ship, what's the purpose of the ship going back out there, like, what's pulling these crew members back together. Maybe it is this kind of one last shot with the, I can say maybe if we want to involve the NX-02 as this, like, recurring element that we kind of deal with. We get an Andorian liaison on the NX-01 along with Archer and T'Pol and the Enterprise. Maybe we get a Tellarite on the NX-02 who's watching that ship and is involved there. And the last kind of shot at making this work is kind of integrating these species into single crews, and we need the best of the best to hold it together. And there's Romulan interference going out on the fringes of this collective space that we have with the Coalition, and there are rumblings of subterfuge happening, whatever that minutia is, what's drawing us out there. But we have to go out there and deal with it, and we have to involve everybody. Instead of having Andorian ships and Tellarite ships and human ships and Vulcan ships, we're going to integrate these crews a little bit more and have people working together to solve these things. And we need our best of the best to kind of be there to shepherd all of it. I think there's more to flesh out there for sure, and I would like to do that. But I think that's good enough groundwork. If we're talking like story outline and basic, like where are we taking this, like basic kind of writer's room kind of conversation, like how are we going to do this? That is satisfying to me as like a jumping off point. So I think we've kind of covered everybody. We haven't really talked about Phlox, but Phlox, I think he's a pretty content guy. Is he Is he happy on the ship? Is he talking about going back to Denobula? Where do you? I just want.
I feel like I think he would stay loyal to the ship.
I think he would stay loyal to the ship too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we don't even like no one goes and visits him. He just is once he's just there, and he's just
Managing a
I
sick
don't know.
bay, dealing with
It'd
these.
be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like he knew what was going on, and he wants to be a part of it. And, yeah,
I would
I
be
don't
satisfied with the three characters who are on the ship, not needing to be pulled back, being T'Pol, who's kind of in command, doing her thing, trying to hold it together. Trip, who's
know.
managing the refit,
Yeah.
not eager to run
Yep.
away from T'Pol, not eager to like just drop and run. Is there
He's.
helping T'Pol and managing the refit and making sure the ship's ready to
I
go.
think his parental instincts kind of get transferred from the baby to
The ship.
back to the ship a little bit. So he's
Yeah, there
really
you go.
focused on that, but he wants to be, within arm's reach of DePaul. So
Of
I think
course.
he's definitely there as well.
And then Phlox is in sick bay, dealing with whatever he deals with. I don't counseling T'Pol, and I can see a scene where he's talking to T'Pol about in maybe the mess hall as the ship's being refit.
Or there's some
Managing
medical
it.
reason that's making them go out, and he's working on that, or something like that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's anything. There's all kinds of ways you could keep him tied in. Um,
Yeah.
but I would be content to have him be on the ship and not be one of the people that needs to get like reeled back in. Um, and I think it would be cool to have T'Pol be the one who's kind of like an interesting flip on her character would be to have her be the one who's like the motherly, like we need these people back together, like we need the crew together and the family together, like having that come from T'Pol, I think
Yeah.
shows some considerable growth for her going back to Broken Bow.
Mhm.
And her being like the outsider who doesn't want to be there, have her be the one who
Yeah.
is most concerned with
Brings
we
them
need
back.
these people
Yeah.
back. And I
Yeah.
think her experience with the Trillium and her emotional growth and where she is as a person, I think all kind of lends itself to that. Like that's kind of her comfort zone that allows her to be her. Have these people there, and that feels right based on where her character's kind of gone, and I think that's dramatically satisfying to me. I can see her like in that position on the ship, like I can see her brain going like through her eyes the way Jolene Blaylock would play her. Like there was always
Yeah.
like all Vulcans, it's all unspoken.
Mm-hmm.
The urgency to get the crew back together makes perfect sense for her. So yeah, I think we did a pretty nice job thinking about a way to do this that's not standard issue, predictable episode 1 traditional season.
Yeah.
I think there's some cool different things that you did a really good job developing, and I think we talked out in a really interesting way. So I hope anybody who finds this, tunes into it on YouTube or on Periscope here, enjoys it, and might share their thoughts in the comments over on YouTube or on Twitter. What do you think about the direction we're going? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you surprised by it? And I would certainly hope to double back to this and keep going and keep pushing forward with
Yes.
with this.
I think that should be the plan.
That should definitely be the plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I think that'll do it. We're at about an hour now. Any closing thoughts? Do you want to shout anybody out? All right, let's just. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's just. No, I think we should just wrap it up here.
Let's just wrap it up.
Yeah.
As always, you can find us both on Twitter. You can find me at TrekFan4387. Dan can be found at Trek Live.
At Trek Live. Yes, I hope to be back on the Twitter sphere with everything settling down here, and I can get back to my review watch and sharing my thoughts with that. So, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. You can find us there. Conversation doesn't have to stop here. You can find this, as I said, on our on the Periscope page. All of our live streams are there, and as always, this will be uploaded to YouTube in the next day or so, where the huge bulk of our back catalog can also be found. So check us out on YouTube. Check out all our old stuff. Check out everything that we have coming in the future, and stay tuned. We have good stuff planned ahead. So we'll see everybody next week, and
Yep.
stay safe and live long and prosper.
Yep. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.